By the morning of the 23rd, the BEF, along with the French First Army, was stuck out on a limb, now that the Belgians had fallen back to the River Lys, which ran in a northeasterly direction, and the BEF had fallen back to the border, which ran in a southeasterly direction. German forces were pressing the BEF hard along its front, northern and southern flanks, and with Guderian's panzers now at the channel, it was in danger of being surrounded before it could fall back to the coast. The situation could hardly have been worse. Yet it did not stop the Prime Minister, fresh from his latest trip to Paris, ordering Gort to counterattack, not on the 26th of May, but immediately, with 8 British and French divisions and the Belgian Cavalry Corps on the right. "Here are Winston's plans again," railed Pownall. "Can nobody prevent him from trying to conduct operations himself as a super commander-in-chief? How does he think we are to collect 8 divisions and attack as he suggests? Have we no front to hold, which if it cracked would let in the flood? He can have no conception of our situation and condition. Where are the Belgian Cavalry Corps? How is an attack like this to be staged involving 3 nationalities at an hour's notice? The man's mad." It was true that British and Belgians had been holding off the Germans reasonably well in the north up until then, but of course Army Group B was largely infantry, and almost completely so now that 2 of its 3 panzer divisions had swung south. Thus it had to move mostly on foot, and this took time. Unteroffizier Helmut Damm and his machine gun company in the 56th Infantry Division had managed to commandeer some bicycles. They discovered there were many around, and that made life considerably easier for them. As Grupper leader, he took a Baker's bicycle, which had 3 wheels and a pannier on which he managed to set his heavy MG08s and ammunition cases. The division had been part of 6th Army, but on the 19th it was attached to 18th Army instead, and so now was advancing almost due west towards Gand and Dunkirk, and facing the men of the BEF. On the 20th, Helmut watched the unusual spectacle of the division's artillery marching past its infantry to take the vanguard of their advance. It then hammered the Belgian positions, and the infantry followed. Helmut read this unorthodox practice as a sign of the Germans' dominance and their mounting confidence. He and his men then found themselves in a resting position near Updorp, some 30 miles east of Gand, for a couple of days. It gave them a much-needed respite. By the 22nd, they were moving forward again, however this time to attack Gand. The town fell to the 56th Division the following day. Lieutenant Siegfried Knappe and his 24th Artillery Battalion were now in France at long last. As part of Army Group A, they had taken part in what seemed like an impossibly long and exhausting march, which had begun near Cologne. Ahead of them, they had often been able to hear the sounds of battle, and as they passed first into Belgium and then France, they could see the evidence of fighting too. Burned tanks, blown-up bridges, dead livestock. Pontoon bridges had already been built across most of the rivers they came to, and felled trees pushed from their path. At Bras, in Belgium, they had to leave behind their first horse. Other candidates for exhaustion, noted Siegfried, were the battery blacksmiths. This was how most of the German army moved, by horse, by bicycle, and on foot. Siegfried's battalion crossed the Meuse at Rommel's crossing point, south of Eu, then, once in France, was assigned to Panzer Group Kleist. The scenes of battle grew steadily worse. Dead cattle and other livestock were everywhere, he noted, the victims of bullets, mortars, artillery shells, and bombs. Their bloating carcasses lay in the fields with their legs sticking up. I learned that the smell of rotting flesh, dust, burned powder, smoke, and petrol was the smell of combat. He was also shocked by the sight of his first dead soldier. They had been trained to deliver death quickly and efficiently, and of course he knew that in wars people get killed. Indeed, comrades of his had died in Poland, but it had always had a clinical connotation for him. He mourned their loss. But now seeing a bloodied, stinking, and mutilated corpse that had recently been a living, young human being was quite a shock. The men he saw were French Moroccans, their eyes and mouths open, limbs skewed in grotesque fashion. The experience was impossible to forget, he wrote. From that moment on, death hovered near us wherever we went. And he was also shocked by the numbers of refugees traipsing along the roads with their paltry belongings, and clearly without much idea of where they were headed. I felt sorry that we had to do this to them, he noted. They were paying a terrible price because France had declared war on us. When Hitler heard the news that Guderian had reached the Channel coast, he was beside himself with joy, and immediately began to occupy his thoughts with peace terms. "We are seeking to arrive at an understanding with Britain," Halder noted after a Führer conference the following day, "on the basis of a division of the world." That same day, Hitler met Großadmiral Erich Raeder, C&C of the Kriegsmarine, German Navy, and the admiral asked Hitler whether he had any plans for an invasion of England. Beforehand, the Führer had made it clear that he preferred an economic blockade and naval and air strikes to bring Britain to her senses. Nonetheless, Raeder had ordered a preliminary investigation into the feasibility of an invasion the previous November. So too, as it happened, had OKH. For now, though, Hitler told Raeder not to think in terms of invasion, but to continue the economic blockade and to intensify naval warfare against the British Isles. In a directive a few days later, the Luftwaffe was given unlimited freedom of action against Britain just as soon as sufficient forces were available. The naval staff certainly welcomed these directives. They indicate clearly the object of this war, noted the OKM War Diary: the annihilation of the main enemy, England. The way to her defeat lies through the destruction of France, her continental sword, to the starvation of the British Island Empire, and to the ruination of her economic fighting power. In the meantime, Hitler needed to finish off France, Belgium, and the British forces there. Late on the 21st, Guderian at last received orders to continue his advance, now in a northerly direction, with the capture of the Channel ports as his objective. This did not begin in earnest until the 23rd, because the day before, 1st and 2nd Panzer had been ordered to secure the Somme bridgeheads and wait for the rest of von Wietersheim's mechanized divisions to catch up from Sedan. But the following day, in lovely early summer sunshine once more, each of Guderian's panzer divisions was beginning its assault of the key Channel ports of Boulogne, Calais, and Dunkirk. 10th Panzer, briefly taken out of his command the day before, had now been handed back once more, and so he ordered it to press on to Calais, while 2nd Panzer attacked Boulogne, and 1st Panzer made straight for Dunkirk, a mere 25 miles to the northeast. 3 divisions, 3 towns. The arithmetic was very simple. Guderian had good reason for optimism. Even though the British troops trapped in Boulogne and Calais were fighting fiercely, soon all 3 ports would surely be in German hands. And once that happened, there would be no chance of escape for the French, Belgian, and British troops trapped in the encirclement. Since the Allied commanders barely knew exactly what was going on half the time, it was not surprising that most on the ground had only a sketchy idea of what was happening. Most